They are decorated for Memorial Day as well as visited year-round by those who want to remember their loved ones who have passed on. Some are well landscaped, while others may fall into disrepair and become abandoned. Some Washingtonians even owned land that might become one in the future. Today's episode of TVW at Large is about cemeteries. We start our story at the State Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation with State Historic Preservation Officer Dr. Allison Brooks.
We are up to 2,900 cemeteries and burials. About 1,800 of those are historic, and we get more every day. The thing to remember is that citizens could bury family members or anybody on their property until 1946. So that's the reason that, in essence, cemeteries or burials can be anywhere in the state, and that's why we're still finding them.
The cemeteries Dr. Brooks spoke about are scattered all across the Evergreen State and are divided into different categories, including abandoned, public, private, historic, religious, veterans, ethnic, Native American burial grounds, as well as fraternal organization cemeteries. Dr. Brooks also spoke on the subject of citizens finding burials on their property.
Under the law, if you find human remains, you must report it to law enforcement. That's a requirement. It used to be voluntary, believe it or not. But as of a few years ago, no, it's mandatory. When you find human remains, you need to call law enforcement. So if you find 6 or more non-native burials, in order to remove them, you need to go to court and get a de-dedication and permission from the court to remove that cemetery. And then you need a permit from our agency as well to remove the burials.
On the subject of the future of cemeteries in this state, Dr. Brooks indicated the cremation rate is high.
The cremation rate is around 80+%. So the financial feasibility of cemeteries is based on the idea that people keep buying plots, right? And they keep getting buried, and that's how cemeteries, either through an endowment or through the selling of plots, are financially stable. Well, now that you have 80% plus having cremations, that financial stability for many cemeteries is gone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
Switching gears to the state legislature, abandoned cemeteries were a topic covered during the 2017 legislative session. On March 29th, the Senate State Government Committee held a public hearing on House Bill 1907, sponsored by Republican Representative Ed Orcutt.
Well, basically what this bill does, it says that first it defines what an abandoned cemetery is. And then what it does is it has some requirements that if you have bought a plot for yourself or a family member, then you have the right to the burial. And you don't have to go ask permission of the landowner or the owner of that cemetery. And then it also, when a cemetery becomes abandoned, it transfers documents over to Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation so that there's some preservation of those documents rather than them just being left to the elements or somehow being destroyed.
Orcutt said leading up to his sponsorship of the bill, he heard a story from a constituent.
I had a constituent whose mom was literally on her deathbed, and she had to go and get permission from the owner of an abandoned cemetery. It was not the funnest place to have to go to get permission, had to get a letter signed, and it was just a few hours later that her mom passed. That's time she should have been spending with her mom.
The abandoned cemetery bill was signed into law by Governor Jay Inslee on May 5th. It's worth noting that Dr. Brooks told me that when the entity taking care of a cemetery walks away from it and it becomes abandoned, there is no longer any underlying landowner. That's going to do it for this edition of TVW at Large. As always, I'm your host, Dave Martinson.
Support for TVW at Large provided by the Washington Forest Protection Association and by the Arcora Foundation.